Part 17. Super Role Player. Author, Yuan-san Buletinji. Chapter 168. In order to predict the finals, ESPN is again the main force. They organized a team of 26 experts, including ESPN's own expert reporters, as well as columnists from other media, including Bill Simmons, Mark Stein, J.A. Odand, and Sam Ami of USA Today, even including the superfan and director of the New York Knicks, Spike Lee. In the 26-member panel of experts, in the final round of voting, only 6 people thought that the Spurs would defeat the Heat to win the championship. These 6 people also included Spike Lee, a pseudo-fake fan, because Spike Lee gave him the reason for choosing the Spurs. Yes, because the Heat beat the Knicks. Well, this has to be said to be a joke, but the expert team only supports the Spurs, which also represents the current fiery Heat of the Big Three. Although the Eastern Conference Finals played 7 games and the Eastern Conference Semifinals also played 7 games, the Heat only relying on the name of the Big Three can defeat everything. Among the experts who support the Spurs, remove Spike Lee, a pseudo-expert, and add pseudo-support. The other 5 experts are actually quite famous. Big Mouth Bill Simmons and Sam Amick both support the Spurs' victory. Sam Amick's support for the Spurs is understandable. This USA Today expert reporter has been paying more attention to the Spurs and is also familiar with the Spurs. Therefore, he is relatively optimistic about the Spurs. He thinks that the Celtics can put the Heat force to a tiebreaker, the Spurs can do more. In terms of lineups, it is difficult to compare the Spurs and the Heat. After all, they are 2 different structures, but compared with the Celtics, they are much simpler. Point guard Tony Parker versus Lagerondo, both defensively and offensively. Considering it as a tie, then considering shooting guards, the old Ray Allen obviously can't compare with the shooting guard line composed of the second team of the best defensive team Angzi and the best 6th man Manu Ginobili and Danny Green. As for the small forward, Kawhi Leonard is not inferior to Paul Pierce, but at least he is not inferior to Paul Pierce in defensive terms. In addition, Angzi, who can swing from the 3rd to the 4th position, is the small forward position. From the perspective of Sam Amick, it is more effective, even better than the Celtics. After all, the Celtics do not have the 2 perimeter defensive champions Angzi and Kawhi Leonard. Against the Heat, the defense at the 3rd position is very important. In the 4th position, the Spurs are Boris Diaw and Juan Blair. They attack and defend, complement each other, and are strong, especially Boris Diaw. His partner with Tony Parker can be said to activate the Spurs' offensive system. The Celtics have only one Brandon Buss in the 4th position, which is still a functional power forward that makes up the number, and the Spurs dominate. At the center position, the Spurs are Tim Duncan's cameo, plus Tiago Splitter on the bench. Compared to the Celtics' Kevin Garnett, the Spurs have a little advantage in the depth of the bench. Therefore, on the whole, the Spurs dominate the Celtics. The Celtics can force the Heat to fight back in the 6th game and force LeBron James to turn on the killer mode, and the Spurs will have more opportunity. But for Sam Amick's comparison, Mark Stern said he sneered. He felt that strength is not comparable, let alone 2 unrelated teams that can be compared, and the Heat have 2 top 10 superstars in the league. Among them, LeBron James is the number 1 in the league. This kind of hard power is something the Spurs do not possess. This kind of hard power is the most important in the finals. And Mark Stein basically represents the opinions of ESPN, and ESPN is obviously more optimistic about the Heat. As for Bill Simmons, this belongs to ESPN in name. In fact, he doesn't have much contact with ESPN. He is at best a personal writer who publishes articles on ESPN column. For the Heat and Spurs duel, Bill Simmons vs. Spurs optimistic surprised many people, but when the ESPN host asked the reason, Bill Simmons only answered one name. Angzi. Angzi, many expert reporters were stunned. Bill Simmons then spoke eloquently, "Yes, It is Anxi. My thoughts are similar to Sam, but what differs from him is that I think it's not every position and the Celtics that the Spurs can win decisively. Compared with the Celtics, the Spurs have Anxi. He defended Kevin Durant in the Western Conference Finals. If Anxi can limit LeBron James in the finals, then this finals would be there is no more suspense. Of course, there is no absolute limit. What I want to say is, if the Celtics have an Anxi, no. Or they can just keep Tony Allen. Tony Allen is there to guard Dwight away. Either Germany or LeBron James, the Celtics can easily win the game, and won't lose the G6 game at all. Bill Simmons' words made many people think deeply, and also made many people disapproving. By 2012, many people still didn't know much about 3D players and disagreed with the importance of perimeter defensive players. Is a perimeter defensive player really that important? Many people began to think of Bruce Bowen, Lagabelle, and Sean Battier. In fact, these defensive players have a certain status in their respective teams, but if, as Bill Simmons said, perimeter defensive players are regarded as winners and losers in the finals, then it is a bit too important. These defensive players, most of them feel that defensive players are not up to this point. Before the start of the finals, Anxi suddenly came to the forefront. Bill Simmons's argument made Anxi the hottest topic before the finals. On the morning of June 12, the Miami Heat's special plane arrived in San Antonio. A large number of reporters gathered at the airport pickup gate. When LeBron James came out of the airport carrying a suitcase, a group of reporters surrounded him. LeBron, what do you think of Bill Simmons? Bill Simmons said the Spurs' Anxi was the winner of the finals. What do you think? LeBron, you have played against Anxi, do you think his defense can really limit you? Listening to the questions about Anxi one by one, LeBron James paused and answered these questions in a unified manner. What Bill Simmons said, I will not pay attention to it. I will only play the finals. I will be in 2012. I won the first championship of my career in 2015. As for Anxi, I only played against him once, and he couldn't help me. Can Anxi guard LeBron James? In fact, even Anxi himself did not have that much confidence. To guard against Kevin Durant, it was because Anxi's state was on the table and his defensive awareness reached the top value of 99. In the fourth game, Anxi's defensive awareness declined. Doesn't it just limit Kevin Durant to 70? Therefore, Anxi thinks that in this finals, his minimum expectation should be to limit LeBron James to a certain extent. As for whether he can do more, it depends on his consciousness and state. To be continued. If you like this work, you are welcome to come to the starting point, to vote, and your support is my greatest motivation. For mobile phone users, please go to read. Super Role Player. Author, Yuen-San Buletinji. Chapter 169. Before the finals, it is reasonable to say that the two teams that are opponents will have a wave of guns, but because of the existence of the Spurs, the guns could not start. The Heat have chanted a lot of slogans. What the second championship of the team has been earned, the Spurs can only win the championship in an odd number of years, and this year's championship is definitely not available, and LeBron James said he will win this year. When it comes to the first championship of a career, it's just one sentence: the champion already belongs to the Heat. In this regard, no one within the Spurs came forward to respond. On the one hand, Greg Popovich announced a media ban before the finals, which means that during the opening of the finals, the Spurs are not allowed to accept any form of interviews. On the other hand, Popovich, the old fox, didn't even respond to the Heat's mouths in an interview before the game. As far as Anxi is concerned, the slogans of the Heat are basically poison to their own. The finals have not yet started, and they have defeated their own character. The finals are about to begin. After a few days of fermentation, the attention of the United States has gathered in San Antonio, where the first game was held. In China, Anxi followed the Spurs to the finals, which naturally aroused a lot of attention. If history is to be used, Anzi entered the finals. It should be the Chinese as the main force to reach the finals for the first time. This season, Anzi has broken into the Spurs rotation from the beginning of the season, step by step to the regular rotation, grabbed the starting position after the All-Star weekend, and finally became the absolute main force in the playoffs. It can be said that Anzi's improvement, plus the status of the only Chinese seedling in the last playoffs, has given Anzi more and more fans in China, even comparable to the number of Kobe fans and James fans. Anzi entered the finals. The domestic fans were divided into two camps at once. One is the Spurs support group composed of Enmai, Tsimi and Komi, which has an advantage in number, and the other is composed of Tsimi and Komi. The Heat support group composed of Wei Mi and Remy is no more in number than the Spurs support group, but it is very powerful. The Spurs support group believes, James held his legs to compete for the championship. Last year he met the Mavericks and this year he met the Spurs. He is doomed to fail. The Heat's support group thinks, Anzi is not an all-star, you guys still support him, and those deformed secrets, you will recognize your father as soon as you get to the finals. It's really laughable. Therefore, after the two sides hacked each other for the first time, the two support groups couldn't stop quarreling. If it was before, Anzi would definitely visit domestic forums, whether it was posting or Hyupu, but before the finals, because of his own mentality, Anzi did not visit these forums again, so I don't know the domestic fan group battles. Has already begun, of course, it is still once a year. On June 12, 2012, San Antonio at AMP, T Arena, the first game of the finals kicked off. The arena has been upgraded one after another, from the preseason to the regular season, from the regular season to the playoffs, and now Anzi is on the stage of the finals. Anzi exhaled deeply, and Ginobili next to him patted Anzi on the shoulder. Before the start of the game, Popovich gathered all the players and arranged them. Let's arrange the tactics. The starting lineup has been sent to the technical station. Today's starting lineup is still the same as before. Tony, N, K White, Boris and Tim. I don't think I need to say more about the importance of today's game. Our strategy for this game is the same as before, but the Heat are a team that is good at defensive and counterattacks, so Tony, to lower the rhythm, we grind the position with them, pay attention to the protection of rebounds and the success rate of offense, and do not give the Heat a chance to counterattack fast. The defensive counterattack is the Heat's magic weapon. L.E. James and Wade's quick connection is a must, and even after the development of these two seasons, an eternal classic G and Wade connection has evolved. Therefore, the focus of Popovich's arrangement is to prevent the Heat's defensive counterattack. As long as the Heat can't fight back, the Heat's offensive rhythm will be lost in half. Because it was the much-anticipated final, CCTV and Sina, which owns internet broadcasting rights in China, sent a broadcasting team, while Tencent, which only owns part of the broadcasting rights, also specially sent a commentary team to the United States for commentary and commentary broadcast. The commentary group sent by CCTV is naturally guided by Yujia and Zhang, while the commentary group sent by Sina is K-Fan and Yang Yi, and the commentary group sent by Tencent is Lu Jiachao and Sukun. All three groups of commentaries have been arranged. It is not good. Fortunately, it's still very close to the stadium, so you can clearly see the situation on the stadium. The referee waved to both sides to signal that the game was about to begin. When the and T Arena started on both sides and slowly walked to the center of the field, it turned into a white ocean. In this finals, the Spurs officially prepared 20,000 sets of white cheering t-shirt. Every Spurs fan who comes to watch the game at home will wear this t-shirt, turning the entire basketball hall into white. Well, Welcome to watch the broadcast of the NBA Finals from the 5 sets of CCTV. I am Yuchia. Today I will join Director Zhang to bring you the live broadcast of the first game of the NBA Finals in these 3 groups. In the live broadcast, most of the fans chose CCTV decisively, not because of how good CCTV is, but because the level of interpretation of the other 2 groups of commentators is really unbearable. Then the starting lines of both sides have already played. Let's take a look at the starting lineups on both sides. The Spurs, point guard Tony Parker, shooting guard is our Chinese Angzi, small forward Kawhi Leonard, power forward Boris Diaw and center Tim Duncan. This starting lineup is the regular starting lineup for the Spurs this season, with 2 Americans, 2 Frenchmen, and 1 Chinese. The starting lineup for the Heat is point guard Mario Chalmers, shooting guard Dwayne Wade, small forward LeBron James, power forward Sean Battier and center Udonis Haslem. Of the Big 3, Chris Bosh did not appear in the starting lineup. Obviously, the Heat hope to strengthen the rebound protection of the starting lineup, while also allowing Chris Bosh to act as a substitute to drive offensive offenses. It's a team with a deep bench. Duncan won the opening jump ball, facing Haslem. Duncan's advantage is still very large. Tony Parker steadily advanced to the front court, controlled the rhythm and lowered the rhythm according to Popovich's requirements. After a few runs, Angzi ran back and opened the defense. Leonard at the bottom corner on the other side got the basketball, which attracted the Heat's players and rushed to defend. Angzi ran back again and Leonard shifted the ball in a wide range. Angzi, who went to the other side, received the basketball, and then shot the ball. His shot was very fast because the Heat's defense was also fast. The basketball flew to the hoop quickly, and eventually fell into the net. Go in. Angzi rushed to celebrate, and the Spurs had a smooth start. To be continued. If you like this work, you are welcome to come to the starting point, to vote, and your support is my greatest motivation. For mobile phone users, please go to read. You are listening to novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Super Role Player. Author, Yuen San Buletinji. Chapter 170. With the Heat attacking, Chalmers drove the ball to the front court, and the arena remembered the shout of defense. Defense. Angzi scored a 3-pointer at the beginning of the game, giving the Spurs a good start. Let's take a look at the Heat's offense. 2 CCTV commentators craned their necks and stared at the court. The NBA official arranged for them. It is the commentary in the back row. Although it is located at the back, it also has an advantage. It is condescending and can clearly see the whole scene of the stadium. Mario Chalmers handed the basketball to LeBron James, and now Angzi is defending LeBron James. Seeing Angzi standing in front of James, everyone turned their attention. Can Angzi guard James? Or at least you can limit James. After James took over the possession of the Heat began to break through and score the ball. With the tactics of rebounding and defensive counterattack, it should be said that throughout the season, the strength of James has been played to a large extent. It is only Wade and K. Bosh's personal data began to decline sharply, so there was also the argument that James abolished Chris Bosh, the All-Star insider. In this game, Chris Bosh didn't even start. It can be seen that this All-Star insider, who was one of the league's most powerful forwards before joining the Heat, has completely lost his position in the Heat. James didn't talk nonsense with Angzi. As soon as the first quarter came up, his offense was very strong. After he got the ball, he observed it for a while, and then broke through Angzi's defense with the ball, quickly relying on his physical advantage and speed, cut into the inside. Angzi also followed the defense closely, but at this time his defensive awareness was only 70 points, which could only be able to follow the defense. James, who wanted to defend, could not even break through, which was obviously impossible. James rushed to the inside with the ball and completed a backhand against Angzi's defense. the basketball slid into the rim and scored. James also scored a layup, and the Heat scored 2 points. Ugea reported the scoring situation on the court. Director Zhang began to analyze Angzi's defense. This goal is the first time Angzi defended LeBron James in this game and failed to prevent it. From this, it can be seen that James is indeed the league's first. People, the gap between Kevin Durant and James is still not small. Ugea next to him also nodded, expressing his approval. With this first goal, he made a layup while carrying Angzi's defense, which shows James' personal strength. For James's goal, Angzi rubbed his shoulders. He was a little bit painful when he was hit by James. I have to say that after the Heat gained weight, James' physical fitness is still much better than himself. In the Spurs offense, after a few moves, Tony Parker used Angzi's pick-and-roll screens with the ball. After throwing off the defender, he stopped the jumper and made a two-pointer. 5:2, the Heat's offense, LeBron James directly received the ball from the backcourt. Angzi posted a layup again, but this time the Heat played a routine. Wade went straight down, taking advantage of the Spurs defensive player's footing. When he quickly rushed to the basket, James also directly threw the ball with a straight arm, passing the basketball steadily to Wade's hands. Wade received the ball and made a layup. Leonard, who was chasing behind him, had no time to defend. He could only watch as Wade made a layup. The Heat also scored 2 points, 4:5. Janeway scored points after the opening. For the Spurs, the defense of Janeway's two giants in the opening game is obviously not in place. But Vich is not in a hurry. He knows that it is basically impossible to completely guard James and Wade. For the Spurs, playing their own offense is the most important thing. Control the tempo, Tony, Vichy yelled from the sidelines, and Tony Parker chose to slowly bring the ball to the front court. In order to prevent the Heat from playing the defensive counter-attack they want, the Spurs control the rhythm tightly, slowing down the rhythm, and hitting the offensive success rate. The Spurs attacked and James defended Angzi, but when Angzi retreated to the bottom corner, he and Shane Battier switched defenses. Obviously, this was to prevent the Spurs from attacking and quickly attack and counter-attack. This is LeBron James's good show. Facing Battier's defense, Angzi didn't waste any time. He went straight from the corner to the penalty area. With his own speed and screen, he threw off Battier. Tony Parker immediately scored the ball, but Haslem in the inside was quick. Of supplementary defense, Angzi still didn't hesitate, and passed the basketball directly again. This process took only a second. The basketball was only passed in Angzi's hands, and then Angzi was placed in the penalty area. Duncan caught the ball, hit the big one, hit this layup directly on top of Sean Battier, 7:4. It's another assist. Angzi's performance is very good. The two CCTV commentators naturally kept their eyes on Angzi. Although Duncan scored the last goal, Ugea still boasted of Angzi's assist. The Spurs' offense was very sharp, scoring all 3 consecutive offenses. Various passes made the Heat unable to defend effectively. The Filipino Eric Porstra walked back and forth anxiously from the sidelines. In fact, this finals is very important to Spoelstra. If the final result is to lose the championship, then Spoelstra will definitely lose his position as head coach in the end. Pat Riley cannot be soft to him. In the Heat's offense, it was James who took the ball. He held the ball to face Angzi's defense and rushed directly in, making another layup. Angzi cursed secretly, but he couldn't help it. Next, the Spurs' offense has been as steady as Tarzan, and there was a small mistake. Tony Parker's pass hit Haslem's body and the basketball was taken by Wade, who was the first step. Because of this mistake, the attack ended immediately. The Heat finally played the defensive counter-attack they had always wanted to play. Wade took the ball directly to the front, and James, who was a quick step forward, was already close to the basket. Wade threw the ball high, James jumped directly, caught the basketball after a dunk and scored 2 points again. At 8:7, the Heat surpassed the score. For Anxi, at the beginning of the game, he really couldn't prevent LeBron James. Perhaps as the game progressed, he could at most limit LeBron James a little. The game continued until the 8th minute of the first quarter. At 28:23, the Heat had a small lead by 5 points. James scored 14 points on 5 of 7 shots and Wade scored 9 points on 3 of 4 shots. The two Giants alone scored 23 points in total. The game entered the official timeout. The Spurs failed to limit James and Wade, and then faced the new Chris Bosh. Obviously, in terms of defensive strategy, the Spurs need to adjust. To be continued. Super Role Player. Author, Yuen-San Buletinji. Chapter 171. Next you and Kahi switch defenses. You go to defend Dwayne Wade. Kahi, you go to the power forward position, to defend Chris Bosh. Manu goes on the field, replaces Boris. We attack, hold it down, and slowly burn it with the Heat. Vich made some adjustments and directly replaced Boris Dior and put Manu on the field, hoping to use the experience of the GDP3 veterans to play the offense that the Spurs wanted, and the defense of Anxi and Leonard was actually a bit of a jealousy. Now, since Anxi can't defend James, let Anxi defend Dwayne Wade, and Leonard is not effective in defending Wade, then try defending Chris Bosh. If the Spurs can lock Wade and Bosh, LeBron James alone, the Heat will not be able to turn the sky. After the timeout came back and the game continued, Manu Ginobili played and formed a backcourt partner with Tony Parker. Together with Tim Duncan on the inside, the Audio Technica reappeared, at and AP, 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 T. There was a burst of cheers in the arena. With less than 4 minutes left in the third quarter, after playing, the Spurs attacked first. As soon as Manu came out, he had a spark with Tony Parker. The cooperation between the two outside the three-point line provided the Spurs with a good opportunity. Manu, with the help of a pick-and-roll screen to cut into the inside line, the layup succeeded. The Spurs pulled back 2 points, 25:28. In the Heat's offense, James still got the ball, but he found that the Spurs actually switched defenses. The Spurs have switched defenses. Anxi is now defending Dwayne Wade, while Kawhi Leonard is starting to defend Chris Bosh. It seems that this is the latest adjustment of the Spurs on the defensive end. Let's see how LeBron James is going to deal with it. This ball. In the face of Manu Ginobili's defense, James did not hesitate, and came directly by himself, holding the ball away from Ginobili. James directly rushed into the inside and scored 2 more points. At 25:30, the points difference remained unchanged. Spurs offense, Tony Parker with the ball and Manu Ginobili crossed the top of the arc after a crossover. Tony Parker cut into the inside and tore the Heat's defense line. A group of Heat players rushed towards Tony Parker. An 11 quickly circled out and received a point from Tony Parker at the top of the arc. James immediately rushed over. Anxi did not hesitate to make another point and gave it to Manu on the other side. Then he kept his feet, and continued to withdraw towards the three-point line. James turned his head and rushed to Manu Ginobili, who was also undefended. Ginobili shook his hand and gave the ball to an 11 again. At this time, an 11, who had withdrawn to the arc top three-point line, didn't panic. Busy shot, easy three-pointer. At 28:30, the Spurs approached the point difference. James was a little angry. This round, he was teased by Anxi and Ginobili, so he turned his head and shouted at his teammate. In short, what are you doing? Defense. Defense. An 11 and Manu slapped their hands to celebrate the three-pointer. Anxi made another three-pointer. Now in the first quarter, he has already scored 6 points, 2 rebounds and 1 assist. In the Heat's offense, Anxi once again faced Wade. Last season, Wade, as the soul of the Heat, has been holding onto his own ball, at most, half-pointing with James. As a result, the Heat went all the way smoothly. To the finals, James' undercover performance caused the Heat to lose the finals. For this reason, Wade did not look for other people's reasons, but gave up his own ball rights and handed the team to the control of outsiders. Wade's generosity can be seen in general. As a result, Wade had to play off the ball, which he is not very good at, and Angzi's anti-off-ball ability has also improved, so facing Wade, Angzi is still very calm. Wade rounded the bottom corner, and Angzi followed closely. Then, Wade did not stop at the bottom corner, and ran back and forth from the bottom corner. It can be seen from this that Wade actually wants to cooperate with James. But Angzi stared too tightly. Wade didn't have a chance. LeBron James took the ball and waited on the outside for a while. There was really no way he could do it. He had to come by himself. Holding the ball and cutting into the inside, the Spurs quickly doubled. James did not hesitate, and directly scored the ball. Shane Battier on the three-point line received the basketball and shot the three-pointer directly, but unfortunately, the iron was hit. Come in. Leonard took the rebounds, and without Haslem on the court, the Heat's rebound protection was not so good. The Spurs continued to suppress the rhythm. Tony Parker wanted to pass the ball, slowly leading halftime. In the half-court offense, the Spurs ran a few laps and finally found a chance at the bottom corner, but Kawhi Leonard didn't make a three-pointer, but Duncan took the rebound. Duncan's tip-off directly helped the Spurs equalize the score. And then, James took the ball. Chris Bosh took the ball after the pick and roll, and under Leonard's defense, Chris Bosh still missed the mid-range shot. On the Spurs side, Tony Parker and Ginobili cooperated, and finally Manu made a mid-range shot from the middle distance, which made a successful hit. The Spurs in turn led by 2 points. After the substitution and adjustment of the defense, the Spurs took the situation on the field in their own hands through the change of defense. Chris Bosh's shooting became very uncomfortable under Leonard's defense, while Wade was under Angzi's defense. There are very few opportunities to get the ball. In the remaining 2 minutes of the first quarter, the Spurs continued to expand their points difference. After the first quarter, the Spurs led the Heat by 38-32, 6 points. In the first quarter, both teams scored extremely high points. Throughout the first quarter, both teams seemed to be undefended, but the difference is that the Heat scored almost exclusively by LeBron James and Wade. Of the two, LeBron James scored 18 points, while Dwayne Wade scored 9 points. The two scored a total of 27 points, while the other Heat players only scored 5 points. The Spurs are in full bloom. Tony Parker scored the highest 11 points for the Spurs. Tim Duncan 6 points, Angzi 9 points, Manu Ginobili 7 points, a total of 33 points for the four, and the other 5 points by Ko Wyrnard and Boris Dior scored separately. Leonard scored a mid-range shot, and Dior scored a three-pointer. For James, the performance of the team in the first quarter did not satisfy him. This season, James is already the leader of the Heat, so at the end of the first quarter, James made a fire on the bench because of the ball. The team's offense was terrible, which forced him to go it alone and scored 18 points in a row. This rhythm seems to be a bit like playing the Celtics. What's worse is the Heat's defense. Facing the Spurs' pass and cut tactics, the Heat couldn't prevent it. They actually allowed the Spurs to score 38 points in the first quarter. If it weren't for these 38 points, based on James' performance in the first quarter, the Heat are definitely leading. To be continued. Super Role Player. Author, Yuen San Buletinji. Chapter 172. In the second quarter, Angzi rested for 3 minutes before being replaced by Popovich. In the first quarter, both teams scored extremely high points, so in the second quarter, the two teams started to strengthen their defenses unanimously. When Angzi played, the Spurs still led by 3 points, but the ball was the Heat. LeBron James has gone off the court and rested. At this time, the Heat's lineup is Chris Bosh and Wade with a group of substitutes, point guard Norris Cole, small forward James Jones and center Joel Anthony. On the Spurs side, Tim Duncan and Manu Ginobili were on the court, as well as Patrick Mills and Dewayne Blair. After Angzi came on the court, they faced Dwayne Wade again, Angzi and Wade in the first quarter. In Germany's match, Wade was playing without the ball, and in the second quarter, without LeBron James, the ball was in his hands by Wade. Angzi has played again. He has just rested for 3 minutes. Now the two most indispensable players on the Spurs field, Tim Duncan and Angzi, one is the gate for the inside and the other is the gate for the outside. Ujia continued to tout Angzi, but think about it, since entering the playoffs, the two players with the most minutes of the Spurs should be Angzi and Tim Duncan. In contrast, Angzi should have the most minutes, especially it was a game against Oklahoma City, and Angzi almost played the whole game. Defending Wade, an 11 is still very serious. He knows that Wade is still at his peak at this time. He is fast and has key shots. With the undefeatable breakthrough, an 11 dare not say that he is sure. You can guard Wade. Wade faced Angzi's defense with a slightly different mentality. In the first quarter, Wade was defended by Angzi for less than 4 minutes, and there was no chance of connecting the ball. Since then, Wade has known that Angzi's defense is very good. Serious Wade is also terrible. Facing Angzi, Wade kept dribbling the ball from the outside, making false moves with the shaking of his shoulders. However, Angzi was unmoved. After Wade had been in the game for a while, Joel Anthony pulled it out directly, and a pick and roll of not good quality stopped Angzi. Wade broke through and quickly cut into the inside. Angzi quickly bypassed Joel Anthony, rushed behind Wade, found the opportunity, and snatched the ball in Wade's hands from behind. Wade was quickly dribbling the ball towards the inside to break through, but suddenly, with his hands empty, he turned his head and found that the basketball had been intercepted by Angzi. Steal. Angzi snatched Wade's basketball from behind. Very beautiful defense, Ujia shouted. Fast break. This is an opportunity for the Spurs, they have the opportunity to further expand the score. Director Zhang also quickly explained the situation on the court. Angzi's steal directly grabbed the basketball in his own hands, turned around and launched a fast break. Patrick Mills, who was at the outermost position, was the fastest. He ran through the half-court early. An 11 didn't hesitate to pass the ball directly to Patrick Mills. The Australian caught the ball and rushed into the inside. Make a layup without a defensive player. Spurs fast break. Mills succeeded in a layup, Angzi had a steal and an assist. The performance was outstanding. Yes, as soon as Angzi came out, the situation seemed to be a bit inclined to the Spurs. Instructors Ujia and Zhang gave a blow, and on a domestic barrage live broadcast website, numerous Heat support groups have begun to issue abusive barrage. Damn, why the CCTV commentary is so biased, let's get out of here. Hee, Zhang Yangfang is a Zanhei, and this Ujia is also a shit. Heat, hot, get up quickly and hit these two people in the face. Let them blow Angzi. These barrages are naturally invisible to Ujia and Director Zhang, because this barrage live broadcast website is a live broadcast signal of CCTV and has nothing to do with CCTV. However, the abuse soon attracted the Spurs support group, and the battle between the two sides began again on this barrage live broadcast website. The game is still going on, and the Spurs once again led by 5 points with the quick break after the steal just now. Dwayne Wade had just been intercepted by Angzi, and he discovered that he still underestimated Angzi's defense. Faced with Angzi this time, Wade's dribble was a lot more careful. Wade faces Angzi again, will he come by himself? Wade didn't choose to come by himself. In any case, he just made an offensive error. It's better to let others find the status for this ball. Inside, Chris Bosh quickly got better, defending him is Dewayne Blair. DU Blair with a super stable chassis stubbornly withstand Chris Bosh. Wade quickly hangs the basketball in. Chris Bosh hit DU Blair on the back, but after a few hits, Bosh directly found an opportunity, turned around to make a jumper, and banged, but didn't make it. The rebound was picked off by Tim Duncan, who was guarding the basket, and the Spurs dropped the rhythm again and slowly transported to the front court. Patrick Mills and Tim Duncan made a crossover run. Duncan cut to the mid-range position. Patrick Mills' cut with the ball attracted the Heat's double team. Mills scored the ball directly and Tim Duncan at the mid-range won. With a board shot, the Spurs scored another 2 points, leading the Heat by 7 points. Then facing Chris Bosh's inside singles again, Tim Duncan directly made up the defense and rewarded Bosh with a shocking look. Tim Duncan returned to the front court and turned around to make a jumper. 9-minute. The Heat's inside disadvantages have once again appeared. In the face of Tim Duncan's inside line and his strong inside line, Chris Bosh is obviously unable to deal with it. With a 9-point difference, Eric Poelstra had to call a timeout. I have to say that his timeout was better than Scott Brooks, at least in time. Pause. Eric Poelstra made a substitution. Outside offense could not be opened. Eric Poelstra chose to replace Dwayne Wade to rest, let LeBron James play, then also played with Udonis Haslem, replaced Joel Anthony, to help Chris Bosh stabilize the inside. As for the Spurs, Popovich chose to replace Tim Duncan, let old Duncan take a rest, and replaced Boris Diaw, which was a direct handover to the Heat. In the second half of the second quarter, Popovich. Vicky's idea is obviously to fight the Heat. Seeing LeBron James playing again, the domestic Barrage live broadcast network soon appeared a lot of Barrage. Damn, the Heat, this group of pig teammates, you can't do anything without James, how long will you take a rest, and you want James to come back? Oh, James is so tired. The first game is like this, and there is no rest time. Everything depends on James. Heat, trade. This group of pig teammates, trade as soon as possible. To be continued. If you like this work, you are welcome to come to the starting point, to vote, and your support is my greatest motivation. For mobile phone users, please go to read. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Super Role Player. Author, Yuen San Buletinji. Chapter 173. After more than 5 minutes of rest in the second quarter, LeBron James had to come back again. James raised his head and glanced at the score difference. The score difference was 9 points. His expression was so gloomy. In the first quarter, he personally scored 18 points. Originally, he was going to rest for a whole quarter in the second quarter, but he only took a 5-minute break. When he played, the 9-point difference was the reason, and Angzi, who was standing opposite him at this moment, was the fuse of everything. James opened his hand for the ball, and Norris Cole passed the ball directly. The Spurs had already landed at halftime. Angzi faced LeBron James solo. After Wade left the field, Angzi naturally switched to James' defense. James dribbled the ball for a while, raised his other hand, and directed his teammates to move. Chris Bosh pulled directly to the outside line and cleared the inside line for James. James began to lower his body and speed up the dribble. Obviously it is going to single Angzi. After a probing step, Angzi moved a little, and James took advantage of this opportunity to rush in directly. Du Blair quickly made up for it, and with Angzi who was closely following the defense, the two doubled LeBron James. After the double teaming, LeBron James quickly chose to take the ball. James Jones, who was outside the three-point line, received the basketball and directly shot the three-pointer with a scream. When James returned to the defense, he slapped James Jones and returned to the first wave of offense. LeBron James drove the Heat's offense again. On the domestic Barrage website, A series of 660 SIXs were posted, and some of them who talked about the role of LeBron James sent out some barrage. As soon as James came back, the Heat scored 3 points. Pretty. This is LBJ. You have to watch him at the critical moment. Shut up, sunspots. Your father James is starting to slap in the face. Angzi found that with 70 defensive consciousness, it is difficult for James to limit his full strength, let alone prevent death completely. It is too difficult. The Spurs attack, Boris Diaw's high support, Angzi moved to the top of the arc, and directly used Diaw's cover to throw off James and hit a three-pointer directly. Angzi responded with a three-pointer, and the point difference was still 9 points. The Heat returned to the offensive end. James, who scored 18 points in the first quarter, continued his resolute offense. He once again forcibly broke through Angzi's defense and rushed to the inside. Diaw and Blair doubled again. LeBron James still scored the basketball. Chris Bosh, who withdrew to close range, made a close jumper and successfully hit. LeBron James got another assist and the point difference was reduced to 7 points. As soon as James comes back, the Heat state is different, and there are many opportunities for the offensive end. In fact, Uchiha's commentary is still very objective, and he clearly stated the role of James' return. Manu Ginobili missed a mid-range jumper. LeBron James rushed to grab a rebound. After he grabbed the basketball, he directly launched a fast break, ran all the way with the ball, and rushed directly to the front court. While Angzi hadn't settled, James directly broke through with the ball. After rushing to the inside, he directly chose to lay up, causing Angzi's foul, but the ball was not scored. The referee blew the whistle and James hammered his chest. If he made both free throws, he would have chased the Heat for 4 consecutive points after he played again. James stepped to the free throw line, and the Spurs were already preparing for substitutions. James made the first free throw, the at-end arena rang out with boos, and the Spurs also announced that they would replace Danny Green and replace Ginobili. The new Danny Green also brought Angzi a new adjustment for Popovich, that is, next Angzi will top the power forward position, let Boris Diaw play the small forward, and Angzi will go to defend Bosh next. James handed it to Danny Green to deal with. Obviously, after tasting the sweetness in the second half of the first quarter, Popovich once again used the trick of TNG horse racing. James also hit the second free throw, and the Heat were still 5 points behind. With the Spurs offense, Danny Green, who had just been replaced, missed an open three-pointer, and Haslem protected the rebound. Haslem handed the ball directly to James, and when he came to the front court, James found that his opponent defender had become Danny Green. But for James, the defender in front of him is the same. There is no difference. He still chose to break through. Since there is no player among his teammates who can create offensive opportunities on his own, he will personally create offensive opportunities. James broke through to the inside and Diaw and Blair doubled over again. James glanced around and found no outside player who could divide the ball. So there was nothing to do, he just stuffed it inside and passed the ball to Haas. Lame, after Haslem received the ball, he took a close shot and the basketball stumbled into the rim and scored. Then, with the Spurs offense, Angzi made a successful mid-range shot and the point difference was still 5 points. Looking back, James continued to break through. After forcibly breaking through Danny Green's defense, he succeeded in a layup and caused a foul by Diaw and Blair, who was also defending. He went to the free throw line again and made a free throw. With a 2-point difference, the Spurs offense was also very smooth. This time it was Danny Green and Angzi's pass. Danny Green made a three-pointer from the bottom corner, and the point difference became 5 points again. After several offenses, the Spurs' tenacity made the final 5 points unsatisfactory. James's face became more and more gloomy. He continued to play singles with the ball and rushed to the inside. After attracting the defense, he went outside again. Split the ball. This time Chris Bosh received the basketball, but Angzi's defense made Chris Bosh's ultra-long two-pointer miss. Fortunately, James on the inside line grabbed the rebound and forced a layup to get 2 points. In the second quarter, James relied on his personal strength to reluctantly drag the team forward, but the Heat's disadvantages can already be seen at a glance. The second quarter ended soon. James, who carried a team alone, played less than 7 minutes and scored 11 points and 4 assists, helping the Heat to bite the score. However, this is not good news for the Heat, because the Spurs used their bench lineup throughout the second quarter. Only Duncan and Manu played for a few minutes in GDP. Tony Parker did not play, and neither did they play. With Leonard, the Spurs only relied on Angzi with a semi-main lineup to bite the Heat led by LeBron James and Chris Bosh. The Heat in this game is already very dangerous. Now only James can play normally. He scored 29 points and 6 assists in the first half, but the team's situation is not optimistic. Ujia's comments are still fair, but from you can know what he said, and now he is not optimistic about the Heat. Director Jong was optimistic about the Spurs from the beginning to the end, so he continued on Ujia's topic: one person can't beat a team. In history, one person can beat a team. In my opinion, only Wilt Chamberlain, Michael Jordan, and Kobe Bryant, LeBron James can't do this. To be continued. If you like this work, you are welcome to come to the starting point, to vote, and your support is my greatest motivation. For mobile phone users, please go to read. Super Role Player. Author, Yuen San Buletinji. Chapter 174. Director Zhang's remarks earned him the title of a full-fledged science blower on the Bullet Screen Live Broadcast Network. But no one cares about these details. At the end of the half, the Spurs led the Heat by 6 points at 72-66. After returning from the second half, it would be difficult for the Heat to hold onto the score. Angzi didn't play in the third quarter for a whole quarter. Watching the GDP3 elders brought Leonard and Danny Green on the court to score consecutively, and only one of the defensive Heat, James, could score. At the beginning of the second half, Danny Green made a three-pointer, then Kawhi Leonard made a quick break dunk and the Spurs scored 5 points in a row. In these two rounds, the Heat can only rely on James' strong attack to attract the Spurs doubled, but James' 2 points, his teammates failed to score. This scene was so angry that the domestic Jean-Mi began to curse, "Pig teammates." However, after Angzi left the field, he gave Wade some opportunities. He successfully broke through Danny Green's defense in the middle and rushed into the interior, but Duncan was rewarded with a big cap. With the obvious disadvantages of the Heat's inside line, the Spurs' inside line advantage became more and more obvious. Duncan made a big blow to the four sides inside, and the Heat had nothing to do. In the next 3 consecutive offenses by the Spurs, Duncan either succeeded in a mid-range jumper, or dunked inside, or made a 45-degree rebound shot after a post-up single. Duncan scored 6 points in a row, and Popovich also ordered to reduce the attacking rhythm and ground the battle. Then, Wade and Bosh, who were fully in control of the rhythm, began to defend against misfires. Instead, they let James go to the offense alone. James continuously broke through Manu Ginobili's coping defense and scored consecutively. By the end of the third quarter, James scored 13 points again, but the Spurs further expanded the lead. At the end of the third quarter, the Spurs were 100-88, leading the Heat by 12 points and entering the fourth quarter. In the fourth quarter, the original members of the Heat support group also expected the Heat to rise in the last quarter, but the fourth quarter turned into a collapsed quarter for the Heat. James, who scored 42 points in the first 3 quarters, was also misfired, and Angzi's appearance made Wade and Bosh unable to play. The Spurs sent a defensive lineup in the fourth quarter: center Tim Duncan, power forward Dewayne Blair, and junior forward Kawhi Leonard, shooting guard Angzi and point guard Patrick Mills. The purpose is obvious: is to use defense to make the Heat's offense completely misfired. And they did this too. At the beginning of the fourth quarter, James missed consecutive layups. Leonard was defending him. If Leonard's defense is not as good as Anxi, it would be impossible to defend the real James. It has this effect. So Uchiha uttered a big truth: as of now, James is tired. Yes, James is tired. He scored 42 points in 3 quarters. Almost every wave of the team's offense needs his breakthrough. Anyone who changes will be tired. And Barrage Live Network did not abuse the two commentators of CCTV anymore, because they felt that Uchiha had said their aspirations this time. James was tired, and they blamed the pig teammates. In the fourth quarter, the Spurs played a wave of 27-17 and won the Heat by 10 points. At the end of the game, the Spurs won 27-105, 22 points advantage, won the first game of the finals. The fans of the and AMP-T Arena stood up and cheered. Anxi followed several veterans in the team and waved to the sidelines and cheered. Winning the first game was a 22-point victory. The whole game was played from beginning to end. There were no waves, which shows that the Spurs have crushed the Heat. LeBron James had a sullen face. He stood on the sidelines with his hips akimbo, and he was reluctant to leave the field for a long time. It was not until a staff member came to call that James slowly left the field from the other side of the player channel. After the game, the technical statistics of the game were also released. In this game, Anxi's defensive performance was average, and he could not prevent LeBron James. Even a slight restriction could not be achieved, but Wade and Bosch, the performance of this game under Anxi's defense was miserable. On the offensive end, Anxi showed his strength, making 8 of 14 shots, including 5 of 8 three-pointers, scoring 24 points, plus 4 rebounds, 5 assists, 3 steals, and 2 blocks. The data is very beautiful. It can be said that just looking at the data, many people would think that Anxi is an all-star player, and this data also gave Uchiha a lot of reverie. Anxi made 14 shots in this game and scored 8 goals. Among them, he made 5 of 8 three-pointers and 3 of 4 free throws. A total of 24 points, 4 rebounds, 5 assists, 3 steals, and 2 blocks were scored. The data is very beautiful. Zhang, do you think that if Anxi continues this performance, is there a chance to compete for the finals MVP? Director Zhang smiled and said, there must be a chance in this game. Anxi's performance can be regarded as an all-star level. However, there are still 2 questions about whether he can win the finals MVP. The first is, the Spurs must win the championship. In history, except for Elgin Baylor, all the winners have won the MVP. Another question is that the Spurs have players who perform better. In this game, in addition to Anxi, the Spurs also have 3 players who have scored more than 20 points. Director Zhang looked down at the data and continued, one is Tony Parker with 20 points and 8 assists, one is Tim Duncan with 22 points, 13 rebounds and 5 blocks, and the other is 27 points and 5 rebounds. Manu Ginobili, with 6 assists, is actually the GDP trio. The 3 of them are the same as Anxi. If the Spurs can win the championship, then the 3 of them actually have a better chance than Anxi. Director Zhang's analysis is still very reasonable. Uchiha smiled and said, it's not certain that the Spurs will win the championship. Although the Spurs won a 22-point victory in this game, the whole game has been it suppressing the Heat, but one series has many changes, and it is very likely that the situation will change drastically in the next game. Uchiha explained, but his explanation was a bit late. Whether it was on the Bullet Screen live broadcast network or on major forums, the abuse of the 2 CCTV commentators has already begun, for a very good reason. Simple, the Heat support group felt that the commentary directed by Uchiha and Zhang was too biased towards the Spurs. Is it still possible to watch the finals? Uchiha and Zhang Yangfang's commentary are too special for the Spurs, right? Is it because the Spurs have an Anxi? A role player, who has been blown up like this by you, is there still a chance to win the finals MVP? What about your morals? Yeah, I only played one game in the finals, and I started discussing the finals MVP. Is this really good? Don't put the heat in my eyes. The speeches of the Heat support group in major forums quickly triggered a battle between the two fan groups again. The Spurs support group carried a 22-point victory. Only by this big victory, the Heat support group was firmly suppressed. Living. The only thing the Heat support group can do is to keep stubborn. To be continued. If you like this work, you are welcome to come to the starting point, to vote, and your support is my greatest motivation. For mobile phone users, please go to read. Super Role Player. Author, Yuen San Buletinji. Chapter 175. In the interview after the game, the head coaches of the Heat and Spurs participated. In the face of doubts from the media, Eric Spoelstra could only say tactfully, "Today's game, we only have one LeBron performing normally, Dwayne and Chris both performed poorly, so this means we still have a lot to do next. We need Dwayne and Chris to stand up as soon as possible to help the team score." Spoelstra calmly threw the pot to Wade and Bosch, and Wade and Bosch took the initiative to buckle the pot to themselves when they were interviewed in the dressing room. They all said, "I didn't play very well in this game, and I need to adjust myself as soon as possible." In an interview, LeBron James said unceremoniously, "I can't win the game by myself. I hope my teammates can also stand up in this regard. The Spurs have done a lot better than us too much in this game. I scored 48 points, 8 rebounds and 9 assists, but my teammate, Dwayne only scored 18 points, Chris only scored 13 points. I think the next game, they should stand up. As long as you stand up, we can win the game. Also, our focus on the defensive end is very poor, which allowed us to lose a lot of points, allowing the Spurs to get a high score of 127 points. I think this is also an important factor in our loss." James' interview turned into a failure summary meeting, and of course it was James alone. The Spurs immediately changed their style. The post-match press conference hosted by Popovich became a summary and commendation meeting. Popovich praised the performance of the GDP's 3 veterans and emphasized Angzi's performance. Angzi did a great game in this game. He scored 24 points on the offensive end and delivered 5 good shots. On the defensive end, Dwayne Wade and Chris Bosh were restricted. His performance really surprised me. As for the MVP of the finals, Popovich has not been so public. He said in a low-key manner, "The finals have only been played, and we have not guaranteed the final victory, so now we are talking about the MVP of the finals. It's a bit early." And in the Spurs locker room, there are also batches of interviews going on. Angzi naturally gathered a large number of domestic reporters. They surrounded Angzi and asked questions about the finals. "Angzi, what do you think of your performance in this game?" "In this game, I personally feel that my offensive performance has exceeded my expectations, and the defensive end has just met my expectations." An 11 thought for a while and replied, "Na Angzi, in this game you got the Spurs' second highest score, then do you think you have a chance to win the finals MVP?" Angzi glanced in surprise at the reporter who asked this question, a little girl in her early 20s. Angzi glanced at her reporter card, a reporter from Tencent, and there was an internship on it. Angzi smiled helplessly, "The finals MVP or something, I don't think it is suitable to talk about it now, because the finals are far from over, and even if we can ensure that we win the finals, we should not talk about it in front of me. Because my strength is still not that strong." The little girl blushed and was a little embarrassed, but an 11 smiled at her and comforted her. After answering a few more questions casually, Angzi ended the interview and went to the locker room to take a shower. When he came out, the reporters were all gone. Of course, they were all driven away by the press officer. After all, most of the players were already there. I went to take a shower, and if there were still reporters carrying guns in the locker room, something went wrong the next day. The first game of the finals between the Spurs and the Heat ended, but UN did not retreat. Discussions about the first game of the finals can be seen everywhere. On IG in the United States, many neutral fans expressed their views on the opening game of the finals. In the first game of the finals, the Spurs won with 22 points. They mastered the situation of the game. It seems that LeBron James is about to usher in another wave of slings from the San Antonio Spurs. The Heat lost the first game. Was this result unexpected? The defeat of the Heat is really a big upset. Who would have thought that the Big Three teamed up for 2 years, lost the first year, and lost the first game of the second year so badly? They are going to die, and the Big Three are going to disband? Yet there is nothing to say. On IG in the United States, they are all pessimistic about the Heat, not optimistic about the Heat's next performance. In China, it is naturally a battle between the two major fan groups. No one agrees. But what the Heat support group cannot deny is that the Heat is indeed at the most dangerous moment. Experts from major American media also commented on the opening game of the finals on their social networking sites. Before the game, Bill Simmons, who thought Anxi would be the winner of the finals, said, "The result of the opening game of the finals is out." Now, the Spurs won a big victory, which hit a lot of people in the face, and Anxi's performance was not bad. To a certain extent it showed the strength of the winners and losers in the finals. Another expert who supports the Spurs, Sam Amick, wrote on his Facebook page, "The Spurs have won, a 22-point victory. They controlled the field from start to finish in a simple sentence, did not draw any conclusions, but the meaning is already obvious. Your ESPN predictions are that the Heat will win, the result. The Spurs' first big win. And the Heat have no chance at all." Regarding the Spurs' victory, Mark Stein of He once strongly believed that the Heat would be the winner of the finals before the game. After this game, Mark Stein could not help but say what to predict. But gave the Heat an idea. The Heat lost the first game. After the whole game, there was no chance. I think the Heat need to make some changes. For example, let Chris Bosh return to the starting line. The Giants can cooperate more. The Heat should also increase the number of times Chris Bosh takes the ball in the middle distance. The middle distance is where Bosh should appear most, not the three-point line. For Wade, I think Miami should allow Wade to lead the bench more. He is in conflict with LeBron James. Dwayne is also a superstar. He leads the bench and can bring better bench depth to the Heat. A few words of effort allowed the Heat to let Chris Bosh return to the starting lineup, and let the Heat's sole Dwayne Wade go on the bench. The most important thing is that when Mark Stein's words were reposted to China as news, domestic James fans also felt that this ESPN expert was right. In the case of Wade and Bosh's poor performance, Wade should make further sacrifices. As for Bosh, they also think that the middle distance is where Bosh should stay. LeBron James should give Bosh more opportunities for mid-range shots. To be continued. If you like this work, you are welcome to come to the starting point, to vote, and your support is my greatest motivation. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Super Role Player. Author, Yuen San Buletinji. Chapter 176. On June 14, 2012, the second game of the finals soon began, and the venue of the game was still AT&T Arena. The Heat really adjusted their starting lineup. Bosh returned to the starting lineup, and Shane Battier became the Heat's starting power forward. The other three Heat starters are LeBron James, Dwayne Wade, and Mario Chamos. It seems that the Heat only listened to Mark Stein's opinion. They let Chris Bosh return to the starting lineup. As for letting Wade be a substitute, he didn't dare to give SPO a little bit more guts. The Spurs continued to maintain their original starting lineup, and in the playoffs, the Spurs' rotation became very stable. At the beginning of the game, Angzi scored again. Facing Wade's defense, Angzi directly made a mid-range shot after receiving the ball and successfully hit. Then, James and Bosch even got the ball into the inside line, causing damage to the Spurs' inside line, making consecutive fouls and walking to the free throw line. However, Duncan was still on the inside. He first completed a 2-and-1, then cut into the basket and dunked successfully. Then it didn't take long for Schifo to complete a violent dunk at the basket and scored 7 points in a row. The Spurs slowly dominated the first quarter. In the face of the disastrous defeat in the previous game, James also changed his style of play this time. He began to consciously save his energy and hand over the ball to his teammates more. However, Wade was locked up by Angzi. There is no chance. So in the first quarter, the Heat's scoring can only rely on Bosch. In order to win this game, James sacrificed himself and gave up the inside space to Bosch, and Bosch did not let the Heat down. He was inside. The continuous strong scoring helped the Heat stabilize the situation. After the first quarter, the Spurs 26-19, leading by 7 points into the second quarter. In the first half of the second quarter, Angzi was replaced again, and the Spurs sent a backup lineup. The Spurs who sent the bench lineup played more and more smoothly, scoring one after another, and continued to exert strength, while the Heat's defense was slightly slack, and the Spurs seized the opportunity. Patrick Mills and Manu Ginobili scored again and again, and the difference between the two sides was quickly stretched to 11 points. In desperation, Eric Poelstra could only switch to James again, which once again caused domestic Jamie to complain, but James' return soon played a role, and the Heat regained their conversion offense. James and Wade took turns attacking, the Heat's 9-0 climax. The Tide chased the difference to only 2 points. Then, a controversial scene suddenly appeared on the court. Facing Wade's attack, Manu Ginobili cut the ball directly. As a result, Wade actually covered his face and fell back. The referee decisively whistled a foul, Ginobili. After 3 fouls, Popovich had to replace him. Without Manu on the Spurs field, the Heat immediately seized the opportunity and counterattacked. At the end of the half, the two teams tied for 43-43 and the game entered the second half. In the second half, the two sides changed sides to fight again, and the scores of the two teams rose alternately. The game was very anxious. The Spurs' offensive state was not very good in this game, which led them to give a lot of opportunities to the Heat. McMillan's three-pointer once gave the Heat a lead, but Manu Ginobili, who reappeared in the third quarter, responded with 2 consecutive three-pointers, and suddenly brought the situation back on the court. Eric Poelstra immediately called a timeout, and after a little arrangement, the two teams played again. After reappearing, James began to exert his strength. He accumulated his strength for a full half. In the second half, seeing the score of the two teams still anxious, he immediately began to exert his strength. He succeeded in 3 consecutive jump shots, and one person scored 8 points in a row and led the team to overtake again. And this is far from the end of James' performance, and then he made 2 consecutive mid-range shots, and he scored 14 points in a single quarter. But after he was off the field, the Heat fell into a rhythm that couldn't play. Ginobili steals Wade to make a successful shot. Patrick Mills scored 3 points in the bottom corner. Tony Parker even scored 4 points with a penalty shot and stopped the Spurs in 3 quarters. 78-77 still hold 1-point advantage. In the last quarter, the two teams began a decisive battle. Angzi also played back to defend Wade. At the beginning of the fourth quarter, Chris Bosh hit Duncan with a 2-and-1, and then McMillan hit a 3-pointer to help the Heat once again lead. But Manu Ginobili quickly stood up again, first with a difficult layup, then assisted Angzi to hit a 3-pointer, and pulled the score back. Next, the impatient Heat began to increase the physical confrontation on the defensive end. Mario Chamos elbowed Ginobili and suffered a malicious foul, but the Spurs were affected by the criminal and missed 4 consecutive free throws, which gave the Heat a chance. At this time, LeBron James stepped up again and made sudden shots, causing Kawhi Leonard's foul, scoring 5 points in a row, and the Heat slightly ahead. The game began to enter the final stage of the final battle. Faced with a dangerous situation, Manu Ginobili, who has a big heart, stood up again, facing Dwayne Wade's defense, once again hit a three-pointer to help the Spurs equalize the score and tie it 90. In order to win the decisive battle stage, Anzi began to switch to James, but the effect of the switch was not very good. LeBron James continued to score and helped the Heat to bite the score. On the Spurs side, Manu Ginobili continued to score with gritted teeth and continued to tie the score. In the next 2 waves of offense and defense, both teams missed, and the more they played to the end, the more intense the game. But then, James broke through to attract a double team, and Chris Bosh hit the ball and hit a three-pointer. The Spurs' misfired Tony Parker's jumper hit the iron, while Chris Bosh continued to perform strongly, breaking through Duncan's defense and making a layup. The point difference was opened by 5 points, and in the final wave of offense, Manu Ginobili hit a three-pointer at the buzzer, but it was too late. In the end, in the second game of the AT&T Arena, the Spurs lost 96-98 by 2 points. In this battle, LeBron James scored 35 points, 10 rebounds and 3 assists, Bosh 24 points and 3 rebounds, Wade 14 points, 7 rebounds and 4 assists, and McMillan 14 points. As for the Spurs, overall the Spurs state is not very good. The highest score is Manu Ginobili, who has been exploding. After 27 points in the previous battle, Manu scored 25 points again, plus 5 points. 4 rebounds and 4 assists, Tony Parker scored 16 points and 5 assists, Tim Duncan scored 18 points and 11 rebounds, and Angzi's score dropped sharply in this game, with a total of 7 shots and 3 goals, all of which were 3. Scored 9 points, plus 6 rebounds, 2 assists, 1 steal, and 3 blocks. On the defensive end, Angzi's performance was still qualified. The defensive Wade made 5 of 15 shots and only scored 14 points, but the offensive end fell a bit faster compared to the previous game. To be continued. Super Role Player. Author, Yuen San Buletinji. Chapter 177. The Spurs lost the second game, and the Heat immediately breathed a sigh of relief. In the 22-point defeat in the first game, everyone felt that the Heat were going to die, but in the second game, the Heat pulled back one sitting. Although they only won 2 points and were favored by the referee during the game, they won. The Heat's victory not only equalized the finals, but also grabbed a home court advantage for the Spurs. This is the most important thing. After winning the second game, LeBron James felt much more relaxed. Then, they will return to Miami's home court and have home court advantage. The Heat obviously expect more. Many expert reporters think the same way. They believe that the Heat's second game adjustment was very effective. James sacrificed a little and liberated Chris Bosh, and the Heat's defense in the second game was fairly good, combining the two. Created a victory for the Heat. The situation in the series has been reversed, and then if the Heat further liberate Wade, the Spurs may not be able to withstand the combined impact of the Big Three. As a result, the Heat's 2-point victory in San Antonio caused a major change in American public opinion. The Heat suddenly took the upper hand in the series, and the Spurs seemed likely to be defeated by the Heat at any time. However, within the Spurs, the loss of the last game did not seem to happen, and players still talked and laughed. The coaches also performed very easily. It is reasonable to say that after a loss, the coach will hold a summary meeting to summarize the reasons for the loss and solve the problem at the same time. However, Popovich did not seem to take it seriously this time. After a day off in San Antonio, Popovich began arranging everyone to go to Miami the next day. The Spurs, like the previous rounds of the playoffs, rented a training hall in Miami, and then chose a hotel near the American Airlines Arena. When the Spurs arrived in Miami, they checked in directly into the hotel. June is the rainy season and it rains directly in Miami. Because of the need to allocate rooms, the Spurs will sit in the lobby of the hotel, watching the heavier rain outside the window, watching the pedestrians rushing in the rain, and watching the south coast of Miami. The style of the city. The hotel the Spurs stayed in Miami this time is the Hilton Hotel, but it is a newly built hotel, so it is certain that there will be no haunted rumors here. In order to ensure an absolute comfortable rest, the Spurs still arrange a room for one person. The room, Angzi's room, was still on the 10th floor, and he carried the suitcase on the elevator. "And, you are on the 10th floor again. You really have a relationship with the number 10. It was Dun Blair who was talking. He built the same elevator as an 11 to go upstairs, but the difference is that Dun Blair lives in the 11th floor. Aren't you the same? Living on the 11th floor means you are destined to be alone." Hearing Dun Blair playing a number game with him, an 11 also played with Dun Blair using numbers. "Why? 11, why is it destined to be lonely?" Dun Blair had just broken up with his girlfriend, so Angzi was really bluffed. "Bachelor, bachelor?" "You know," Angzi glanced at Dun Blair. The elevator had stopped on the 10th floor, but if he didn't figure it out, Dun Blair would definitely not leave. Dun Blair nodded. "Of course I know, it's a bachelor." "Yes, in China," bachelor said in Chinese, "it is a bachelor, which is a stick. Look at 11. The Arabic numeral 11 looks like two sticks. Think about it, two sticks, are you still? Is it destined to be alone for a lifetime?" Dun Blair suddenly lowered his head and looked at his room card. 1111? Damn, really? No. I want to change rooms. Angzi snickered and walked away. He didn't expect Dun Blair to be so terrible, and the room number was still 1. After tinkering in the room for a while and packing his luggage, Popovich collectively notified him to go downstairs to participate in the pre-match media interview. In the Jazz series, Popovich skipped this link directly and prevented the league from coming to stage. This time, Popovich became reasonable and specially arranged a media interview in the hotel. When Angzi went downstairs, the Spurs players were sitting in 2s and 3s in the restaurant in the lobby of the hotel. In front of everyone, there was a reporter holding a video camera or a voice recorder. When Angzi came, he saw Director Zhang sitting aside and waiting. Director Zhang came to the United States this time, not only as an on-site commentator for CCTV, but also as a special correspondent for CCTV. "Angzi," Director Zhang waved to Angzi, and Angzi walked over with a smile. Angzi sat opposite Zhang's guide, and the cameraman carrying the camera shifted the lens slightly to Angzi. "Angzi, let's start the interview directly. Let me talk about it in advance. The content captured by this camera will be broadcast on CCTV before the next game." Director Zhang went directly to the topic. He pointed to the camera and explained for a moment. An 11 nodded and said with a smile, "Let's start then." Director Zhang didn't waste time either. He took out the questions he had prepared beforehand and asked them one after another. First of all, it is a question that a domestic netizen wants to ask: is your girlfriend really Abby Hornacek? It's the daughter of Jeff Hornacek. An 11 didn't deny it either, and nodded directly, "Yes, it's her." "Haha, then you broke the hearts of many fans, such a goddess was snatched away by you." Director Zhang haha joked and continued to ask, "Then you think your chances of winning the Spurs are not great?" In the face of CCTV's interview, Angzi is still not prepared to keep a low profile. "It's still very big, at least our team feels that we have a good chance, because there are actually a lot of problems with the Heat, and we have restrained many places." Director Zhang still didn't ask in depth, and after passing by, he set his goal elsewhere. "Then what do you think of this year's Olympics?" I am looking forward to Angzi did not say too much, because he has not yet received the domestic notification letter, and he dare not say too much. However, Zhang Mingji mentioned it. It seems that the Basketball Association is waiting for Angzi. After playing the finals, the notification letter will be sent to Angzi. Will you participate in the Olympics? There are many people concerned about the Olympics, so director Zhang asked a few more questions. Yes, it should be. After playing the finals, I may go back to prepare for the Olympics, Angzi said vaguely, but he didn't dare to talk nonsense. Director Zhang breathed a sigh of relief. To tell the truth, with Yao Ming retiring, the Chinese people are still very worried about what the men's basketball team can achieve in this year's Olympics. At present, the men's basketball team is not picking up. After Yao Ming retired, he could only rely on the US United for support. The US United's poor performance in the NBA made many people feel that this year's Olympics may create the worst results in history. However, Angzi's turnout suddenly gave the Chinese people hope. Angzi and the UAE, even if they can't create better results and maintain the lowest scores for reaching the knockouts, should they still be possible? To be continued. If you like this work, you are welcome to come to the starting point, to vote, and your support is my greatest motivation.